Hello, everyone. I know that we have some people already connected. So can you please write on the chat just to confirm that everything is working properly? Okay, I know that most of webinars kind of more formal in terms of in the way that communication happens. So please feel free to write down your question even ahead of time in the chat. So maybe at some point we can talk about specific things that you might be interested in or cover them at the end of the session. Because despite this is just a town hall highlights about 3.1 release, we might have some space to chat about other stuff like there are always common questions around the project roadmap or issues or pull requests that we are not processing. So just feel free to jump in and we will be happy to assist as much as we can. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I think this is our first town hall session. The biggest difference for me for a town hall is like a more interactive, less formal than just a webinar. So this is kind of a quick catch up on what is new in 3.1. So we assume that some folks might be new to the project, but others will still be using it for some time. So this is a session that is for everybody, and our intention is try to be more close to the community. So we're going to host these type of sessions every couple of weeks. Okay, so my name is Eduardo Silva, the creator and maintainer of Fluent Bit. There's my new email, so feel free to drop me a line anytime that you want if you have questions. Okay, so first of all, we're going to take a really short activity where we're going to fill out a Google Doc which is open for everybody to type down what do you think about new features, do you think that are very valuable for you, or major struggles that you're facing, challenges, improvements that you would like to see, or any additional feedback that will be beneficial for the maintainers of this project. So to get that started, I'm going to copy paste a link here in the chat for everybody. So even if you cannot open it, just let me know. It's supposed to allow to anybody to edit it and add content on it. Yeah, you don't need to put your name. If you want, just add it. This is just for feedback for the project, so we can know what are you really interested. So yeah, we're going to give just 4 minutes. Just write it down, and even if you don't know what to add here or fill in the document, just go ahead to the last section that we just added about general questions that we can cover at the end of the session. Okay, while you write down some stuff in there, I always say that 90% of what exists in the project today is thanks to the community feedback. So this is a really good opportunity to be upfront and say, hey, I like this, I hate this, or I would love to see this in the future. So please jump in, write it down. Even if something you say, you think that, hey, this sucks, this interface or this stuff, hey, yes, just write it down so we know where we can work on to fix it and make it better. Feel free to add more lines if you want to every box. So, oh, thanks for the feedback, Jonathan. He said that everything has been amazing so far. And he's writing a document to request its implementation in the company. Great, great. Okay, folks, thank you so much. So we are going to review this right internally, but as a general, we love that it has flexibility. It's really lightweight, it's small, and yeah, it can run everywhere. And we're going to get back to this session. So, okay, so most of people use this technology, but not everybody is aware about the origins. So, first of all, FluentD, which is the parent project, and FluentBit are both Apache license, vendor neutral, and are hosted with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation as a full graduated project. Yeah, you know, all projects that joins the foundation has different stages like sandbox, incubation, graduation. We hit graduation, if I'm not wrong, around 2019, some many years ago. So this is the status, and that's why it's production grade. So from a graduation standpoint and incubation, this is kind of the landscape that we have in the telemetry or in the observability space. It's a bit mixed right now. We don't have those separations in the landscape, but we're working with other projects to make sure that we will have more clarity for end users. Okay, so the Fluent ecosystem, that's what it's called. If you go to GitHub, you will notice that the project is called Fluent, and Fluent D was the first implementation, Fluent Bit, the next generation. We always had this vision that observability must be fully baked by fully open source tools, right? And one of being open source is not just about to have access to the code, but also is how to share knowledge on how to integrate systems, right? One of the things that we are always, not in a fight, but in a battle is like, we don't want the vendor lock-in, right? It doesn't matter if you're using Amazon, Google Cloud, or Grafana hosted services. We want to make sure that if you want to implement telemetry pipelines, we provide the best solution available in the market, make it by a foundation, right? Because at some point you deploy this technology in your infrastructure, and sometimes it takes time. And when your infrastructure starts to grow, doing adjustments for the future, it takes time. But at some point, you get pissed off with some vendor, like, hey, this vendor, I don't like how they're working, it doesn't meet my needs. And now I was using some proprietary tools for that, and change everything takes a lot of time. While using a vendor with a no vendor lock-in approach like Fluent, hey, you just change your configuration and you can start talking to another vendor in a very, very easy way. And our philosophy was always provide the best experience and not be a drop-in replacement, but being able to just plug and play in your architecture, in your environment, so you can extract the most of the value of it. And historical image, for many years, we allowed to connect many sources of information of telemetry data with many sources of destinations. And from signals, we support logs, metrics, and traces, and profiling in the future. This is where we are now. And we're here because we're going to talk about Fluent Bit 3.1. This is what we call a major release. Actually, a minor release should be like 3.1.x.0.1.3 that comes with small security fixes. But also, despite we have minor releases, we also make sure to introduce experimental features that are not going to break your use case. So things are not enabled by default. That's what I mean. But you can start experimenting with it. And by experience, we got a really good feedback and really good experience with other users that starting user stuff from the early days before they get officially released, right? And for example, if you connect what we did this open document for feedback. This is the same thing that we do for experimental features. It's like, hey, we're doing our best. This is experimental. Do you want to try it on production? Please be careful and send us feedback, and we can make it better. Okay, let's jump into 3.1. For people who has been using Fluent Bit 3.1, you know that originally Fluent Bit and Fluent D was always to handle log records, right? But recently we got the need that, hey, log records are composed by a timestamp, some metadata, and the record itself. Usually metadata record just key value pairs, right? I'm talking about here, for example, the entries that we have in number 2, 3, and 4. And one of the challenges that we got is like, we got this requirement like, hey, we would like to have metadata that is not per record, but also for a group of records, right? And if you think about OpenTelemetry logs, that's one of the use cases, right? Where they group the records and they share resources, the scope, which is very specific metadata for the hotel OpenTelemetry project, right? So in 3.1, we implemented this concept, which is called group logs. That is a way to have group definitions where we can share this type of metadata in a way that it doesn't break anything in the pipeline. So we can have this support enabled or disabled. It will be totally transparent for you. Now, this is a very internal change. You should not care about it. But I think it was really important to share this concept because we might build more stuff around this implementation. For people who like to modify the records, the log records when they are arriving to the pipeline. For who's using Fluent Bit, you know that for many years we support scripting through the Lua-JIT engine. And Lua is programming language, scripting language that was created in Brazil and is very famous. You will find it in many Nginx configuration files, or if you like to play games on Roblox, you will see that everything is powered by Lua. And one of the interesting thing is like when we implemented Lua, our Lua interface, we didn't touch that interface, well, not the interface, but the Lua library for 2 years, right? Until somebody told us, hey, you have not upgraded Lua-JIT, which is the main engine. But besides performance optimizations, which are welcome for everybody, right? They also come up with other support for platforms. For example, there's people trying out Fluent Bit on Windows on ARM. Yes, random cases, right? But Lua-JIT, the version that we had was not supported on that environment. So what we did was just upgrade Lua-JIT and making sure that you can experience and do scripting on multiple systems. And to demonstrate this for people who's not the Lua-JIT library, but at least how we can do scripting in Fluent Bit, I just prepared a quick hands-on. Okay, can you all of you see my screen, the terminal? Maybe you can confirm by chat. Awesome. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to jump into Visual Code, and we're going to our first config example. This is my sticky notes here. Don't use this. Okay. When we use the YAML configuration file, maybe we're going to try to explain some concepts for people who's new in this. We define some configuration for the main service of Fluent Bit. Flash meaning like how often the engine is going to try to flash the data through the output plugins. Yeah, some log level that we have for the service info. We don't care about debug or traces right now. Okay, and then we have what we call definition of a pipeline. And a pipeline has a couple of components. Here I'm going to use the basic ones, which is inputs or sources, which means components are able to retrieve or generate information for the pipeline. And then we have what we call the outputs. The output is a connector that takes that data that was generated and do something with it. And for example, here we have the input dummy plugin. And what dummy does is just send this message over and over and over, right? And where we're going to send this information to the standard output. And we have a matching rule with a star, which means that everything that has been generated through the pipeline will go through here. Okay, so let me check here. Okay, so let's go to Lua script. So we have that configuration file. And if I run this from the command line, we're not going to do anything with Docker or anything like that today. Full command line. You will see that Fluent Bit is going to generate this message and start to print it out in the standard output interface every 1 second. Right? This is really good just for testing, right? If you want to test it out, processors, modification, this thing is really good for you. Now you will notice that we have the timestamp, there's no metadata, and then we have the record content. This is pretty much what I share here on the other screen. This information, what you're seeing is what we have in line 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Okay, now the thing is how we can do scripting on top of this configuration and making sure that we can modify this. First of all, I'm going to copy paste what I have here and I'm going to explain it. So we have this new concept of processors, which are similar to filters that we had in the past. Filters still works, but processors are attached to the input, and if the input plugin runs in a separate thread, that processing will happen in that separate thread, which will give you more performance. Okay, I'm going to paste here and explain what it's doing. I'm going to uncomment it. First of all, for the input plugin, we define a processors section and then processor for logs, because every input plugin can generate any type of telemetry signal like logs, metrics, or traces. For logs, we're going to load the processor or filter that is called Lua, and this one defines a function that is called CV of callback replace, and the code of this function is here as a variable, as a value for the variable code. This is what we call an inline Lua in the configuration, but if you don't like this and you have a lot of Lua code, you can place that Lua code in a file and load that file instead of adding the code here. Okay, what this function does? This is purely Lua code. This is the function definition. This is where it ends. It receives three parameters. The first one is a tag, which means it's like a label that it gets generated, is attached by the input plugin. Like, hey, this is comes from dummy, or you can set any tag that you want. The timestamp of the record means when this record was generated and the record itself. So what we're doing here is like, if you take a look at the messages that we were generating, we just have the dummy message, okay? And what we're going to do is to take the record and add a new key that is called tag, and we're going to assign the tag value to it. We have the new key that will get a value of new value. And hostname, I'm going to remove it because that was a previous example. Oh, I got a suggestion from ChatGPT, I think. Okay. Oh, this, I'm going to change it. So what we have here, what is called a Lua table. So you just put the keys and the values that you want, and then you just return. You said, yes, this record has been modified. This is the new timestamp, which is the same one. You can change it, and this is the updated record. Now, when this runs, what would happen is that everything will run from top to bottom. Like, dummy plugin will generate this dummy message, then it will enter in the processor's processor part, and for logs, it will run this Lua code. And now, if we run this code, you will notice now that this has changed. I'm going to stop it so you can take a look. The tag has been created. The project name has changed to be Fluent Bit V3, and the new key is here. Sorry, I skipped that. The new key has the new value. And same as you are adding new keys, you can remove them, you can hash them. And actually, I tell this story many times. All of this experience and interesting idea of scripting in Fluent Bit comes from the early days of GDPR in Europe, where many companies approached to us, some Fluent Bit maintainers, and they asked to have a way to add custom logic to manage records that contains credit card numbers. Because if the credit card number belongs to Amex, American Express, to Visa, or MasterCard, they needed to enrich the record in a different way. Okay? And that's why this allows you to bring the business logic into the pipeline. This is not the only way to modify the data, but for people who like to write custom logic with conditionals or import other Lua packages, yeah, this is the way to go. This is how do you do scripting. Okay, and that's why it's important to upgrade Lua. But now you get it with 3.1. Okay, the next one is about OpenTelemetry logs. In OpenTelemetry, there is an assumption, a valid assumption, that all the data is being generated by an application that has been instrumented with the OpenTelemetry SDK. For example, you have a Golang application, you created your own web app or whatever, and you wanted to send telemetry, you implement by using the OpenTelemetry SDK, and that one do you use to send the logs to a collector or to an OpenTelemetry endpoint. Okay, that's the whole vision. But however, I would say that 99% of the world today in production, they are not doing that with logs. Most of them are writing normal logs to syslog, to text file, the old problematic and chaotic things that we have for many years. But the industry wants to move to standardize in OpenTelemetry. So this new processor that is called OpenTelemetry Envelope allows you to take any type of log records that comes as vanilla records and convert them into an OpenTelemetry schema. Right? And this is really good, for example, because that means that any input plugin, we have more than 30, 40 in Fluent Bit. Now you can convert whatever you want into an OpenTelemetry valid schema. An OpenTelemetry envelope is a processor that allows you to do that. So let me show you an example. If you're having questions about this hotel log envelope, please just write down in the chat or in the document, which we're going to read at the end. Okay, I'm going to my second example, which is hotel envelope. And let me show you this. Now the pipeline that we have is pretty simple. Actually, I'm going to comment this processor so you can see how this works. We're going to have a very similar example as before where we generate a dummy message. We're going to use the dummy message automatically. We're going to generate 2 messages per flash, means 2 per second, and send it out to the standard output. So it should be hotel envelope. Here's my config. You know, we're generating a dummy message 2 per second. Every second, 2 messages gets in. Now, if we apply to that, if we say, oh, we want to send that to OpenTelemetry, we just load this new processor that is called OpenTelemetry Envelope. That's it. No more is needed. And if we run this again, you will notice that something is happening. Let me stop it. For example, we're going to use, well, we can use the first one as an example. As you know, what you're seeing here is not one record. You're seeing 3 records, but this is a definition of a group. Again, I'm coming back to what I explained it to the groups concept, where we are defining a resource and a scope ID. And to show you in OpenTelemetry terms, I'm going to run a collector, a very simple collector that just takes data over the port 4318 and sends data out to a file that is called out.json. Okay, so I'm going to run hotel call. Okay, that is running. I'm going to tell this file so we can see how the data is flowing. So our goal will be take Fluent Bit. Well, let me show the configuration. Take Fluent Bit, generate a dummy message, apply the OpenTelemetry envelope, print it out to standard output, and as well send this information to an OpenTelemetry collector that will be received here, and then we will see the data in the file. So we can see how this is being composed dynamically. Okay, as you can see, the data is flowing from the left to the top right and then to the file. I'm going to stop it so we can analyze what we have here. The 2 dummy messages now we were packed in an OpenTelemetry schema with resource log, scope logs, the scope, and all of that. Of course, no extra information has been added, right? We just got the schema. It's like an empty schema, it's just an envelope. And there is. I'm going to make a pause because somebody's asking, what is OpenTelemetry? OpenTelemetry is a new framework, an initiative to standardize how the telemetry data is composed. As you saw recently, different applications generate data in different schemas, different formats. And if you're in a company and a new developer comes in, this developer might create its own format for logging. Imagine different JSON structures. But when you want to send that information for analysis, it's really hard because you had to do a ton of job with your backend provider, for example, Splunk or Apache Kafka, to unify and modify all those schemas so you can analyze them properly. OpenTelemetry is a new way that is being promoted to standardize how logs, metrics, and traces are generated from a schema purpose. Okay, so can I use OT to feed events in Kafka? I think that Kafka does not support OT schemas, but that might be a question for the OpenTelemetry folks. Right? We just care about to connecting hotel to hotel, stuff that is not hotel to hotel, and provide the best experience. Okay, so that was a short pause. So going back here, as you can see, our data has been packaged as OpenTelemetry. And that is OpenTelemetry Envelope. Pretty simple, take any data and package it in an empty envelope that looks like OpenTelemetry. But this is useful if you want to, well, those records packaged without any extra modification might not be that useful. What you would like to do is to modify all that record and add the specific metadata. So when you're querying your information with your OpenTelemetry backend provider, you want to say, oh, show me all the resources or the log that belong to this resource with attributes equals color equal blue. Okay, so now we're going to see how we have extended content modifier for OpenTelemetry logs now, which allows you very easily to modify your logs by using this processor. If you are interested, I think that we can publish this repository with this example later. So you can take a look and don't miss what we were doing here. Okay, so our third example is pretty similar. I just opened the new file. What it basically does is generate a dummy message, apply the envelope. Okay, but I have some stuff that are commented here, and I'm going to copy paste it one by one so you can see how this data will be modified. First of all, we're going to use another processor that is called Content Modifier. Previously, we applied the envelope. Content Modifier allows you to modify anything from the logs, anything, okay? But you have to define the context or what you really want to modify. In this case, we're going to play with the resource attributes. Resource attributes is something that will show up here. Right now is empty, okay? So what we're going to do in this resource attributes, we're going to apply the action that is called upsert, meaning like update or insert if the key does not exist, a key that is called service.name with the value my service. Now, if you run this again, you will notice now that the message here will start being modified. Oops, I had to go down. There you go. Oh, I think that I missed something. Somehow it's not showing up the information. Let me check. Might be because of that. Let me check. Okay, definitely I did something wrong because this is not working bad. Let me check. Let me try other thing here. Auto resource attributes. And let me add the scope name. Ah, I know what I did. I'm still on the envelope example, but me. So we'll go into modifier. Yeah, to be honest, I got scared like, hey, this was working minutes before. You're right, but I didn't change my directory. So I was using a different configuration. Okay, I'm going to leave those here. These two content modifiers will assert this value called service.name with this value. And then for the other, we're going to add a key that is called hostname with my hostname. This is what we call a record accessor pattern in Fluent Bit. You can read more about the documentation. But when you set hostname, it will do an internal lookup of the hostname based on the system call or environment variables and populate that value for you. Okay, so if you run again this, Now we will start seeing that the data is changing with more information here. Let me stop it so you can see it here. Okay, so I need to shrink this window so you can see all the information. Okay, here, for example, we have one part. There's a resource log. Now the resource, it used to be empty before. Now we get the attributes. One of them is a service name that is called my service, right? And then we added the host name that in my case, my host name is called Monox2. And then, yes, we have the log records. As you can see, all these log records will share the metadata that comes from resource. Well, the intention here is not to explain all the OpenTelemetry concepts, but show you how you can play with them. And then we can do other stuff. For example, we can do, okay, we're going to accept the value. We're going to modify the version. OTel has some scope version. Because we're playing with attributes, now we're going to modify the scopes. Take a look at here the context. Resource attributes, scope version. I think I have the scope name here. I'm going to do the scope name. So we are doing, remember, everything is being processed from top to down. Okay, besides I'm explaining content modifier for OpenTelemetry, this is not exclusive for OpenTelemetry log schema. You can apply this for any type of log without any, which is schemaless or doesn't have a schema. So if we modify this again and run it, you will see that the new record has more information. I just stopped it. You will see that attributes are the same, but now the scopes has the scope name, the scope version. Okay, and we get extra information. And now we're going to do another thing. We were playing with all the contexts that were for OpenTelemetry, and now we're going to add one more processing that is just for the log content. So for every single record, we are going to modify the body and insert a key that is name is color with a value blue. Going to stop it. Okay. Now you will see how things are growing, right? So we didn't touch the resources or the scope definition, but what we did was to modify the attributes from each record where for each one of them, we added a key with name color and with a value called blue. The same thing is happening here. So even, for example, if you don't, I'm going to comment out all these OpenTelemetry things. And I'm going to just send information to a standard output. Like a dummy, and I'm doing a simple processing, you will see how this plays out here. Can you see instead of saying just message dummy, now it says message dummy, and the next value that was called color blue. And imagine that at some point you don't want message. You want to reduce the message of your size because it will be too expensive running this, I don't know, in 100,000 instances and sending everything to Splunk, and you want to reduce your, I don't know, your build. You go to the action delete, and you're going to delete the key, for example, message. And if you run that, you will see now that your messages has been reduced, and the only information that contains is the key that is interesting for you. Of course, this is sample data. You will use production data for this. Okay, so we have context for in talking about OpenTelemetry for resource attributes, scope names, scope version, scope attributes. And now we're going to get the fun part, which is the Q&A, but also would like to invite you to scan these QR codes that we have. The first one, which is in the top left of your screen, will give you access, a preview access to the new Fluent Bit book that has been created by one of our community members called Phil Wilkins. So you sign up there and you will get a free copy if you want to read it ahead of time. Also, we want to invite you to the next webinar. which is about parsing 101 with Fluent Bit, how you can deal with parsing, multi-line parsing and everything on July 23rd, which is, if I'm not wrong, next week. And I would like to leave this open now for questions. And just go back here and check if we have more questions. Okay, does everybody has access to speak? Yes. So difference in multi-line parsing, let me make this bigger. Difference in multi-line parsing, Fluent Bit versus file bit, config issue setting regex pattern. Okay, here you are allowed to set up a new start state. Same as you have one in the block, you can add a new one. So even if something doesn't finish, yeah, if you find another pattern that is a start, that's where the previous message will finish and the new one will begin. I'm going to copy paste this document link again in the chat for everybody. And here we go. Okay, this is what I answered. Now, please, you can use the phone to, sorry, the microphone of the phone. The microphone if you want to ask something. You know what is good about the chat and the live document? It's like when you are presenting and speaking, you don't feel that, hey, or asking, is there anybody else on the other side? So at least you get some back and forth. Okay, next question. Is it possible to run a Lua processor script for metrics, processor input? Today is only available, I don't want to about commercial things in the product, that is for commercial product, because it was created a new extension, but now it's in the plans, yes. However, I will be interested to learn if you can add in that same question, what type of processing you would like to add for metrics. For example, we have a processor that is called labels that allows you to remove labels, add labels, but any other interesting use case will be really good for us so we can think in the bigger picture how that little idea, that little need can benefit the whole community. So it's possible, but we would like to learn from the use case. It's possible for the future. That's what I mean. Okay, do we have more questions?
Did I miss the answer to that question I put in there about multi-line parsing?
Okay, for this one.
Yeah.
Here you have defining a start state. Okay, so
right.
the answer that I'm giving you is like, if you don't know when this is gonna end, but you know that you can have many start state at those start state. They're like blocks. So if the first one matches and everything else is a continuation, it won't end until it finds the same start state or one of any other register already. So just add another start state. That's my answer.
Okay.
But I think not all lines are multi-line. So when does the multi-line know when to start if the next line is a single line log entry?
Yes, that is why it's important that, okay, when you read that, for example, a stack trace, and this is sometimes very complex, I understand it, somehow in your mind you know that, hey, this is a stack trace. The same pattern that you applied visually, you have to apply it in a multi-line regex expression. Like, what is the start date? What means a continuation? Most of the continuation, for example, have some empty spaces at the beginning. But everything else that is not a start state and is not a continuation, it should be handled as an independent record. And if it's not working, please open a GitHub issue with your log example. For example, where you can mix multi-line, some lines that are simple, and with your multi-line configuration. And so we can assist you and take a look more in detail. Because multi-line is very complex sometimes.
Where do you want me to submit that, Eduardo?
Please submit it as a GitHub issue, but also when you submit that issue, if you can link that into this document, it will be really easy for us to give it priority.
Yeah. So just to sound it out, like start state, great. Let's look at line 5. My event lines start with one of those two options. So I was curious if on line 3, what would I put in the continue line? Like I would want to put, in my mind, I would want to put anything is in there except for what's in the start state line. But if I put a wild card like a period asterisk in there,
I get it.
It would then consume everything. It won't stop.
Okay, have you tried out rubular.com?
No.
Okay, this website. Okay, so
I use like a regex pattern, like a regex 101 or something. It's the same idea.
okay, yeah, the difference is like we use the Ruby style of regex in same as Fluent D and Fluent Bit, and this one use that one. So sometimes it could be maybe a little difference on how the engine works. And that's why we recommend everybody to use this one. So everything that you have, just give it a try here.
Okay.
Everything.
I'll send it into the GitHub. I noticed that when you post things in your Slack channel, who uses Slack? I don't know. Maybe I should put that into the comments. Like you could do something what like the what OpenSearch does for like a community board where you can start publishing questions and ideas. That's easier to read and search than it is to read and search the Slack channel for examples and past examples and historical questions. The Slack channel just seems to be a bit tough. And no one responds to it regularly.
Yeah, I know. That's like a Wild West, right? Please, yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I have no idea about that, but maybe you can write it down here. Adriana and Caroline might take some action about it. Yeah, because it also happened to me. I wanted to look for something, and yeah, sometimes you get hundreds of messages and you miss stuff. Yeah, please make sure to add that here in the document.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so number 7, our configuration includes many blocks like the following. Okay, this classic configuration, and then second step to parse it. Okay, so you want to do conditionals.
Right. I mean, so it's really a case where we have log messages coming in from a number of different sources. This is a Kubernetes application, so we got logs coming in from everywhere, and we know where they're coming from, and we need to parse them in certain ways. So, for example, we might have console running. We know, so this seemed to be the easiest way I found to identify where a log was coming from, and then to parse it because we know, oh, it's a console log, therefore we want to use one of these sets of parsers. But there's lots of different pieces of the application, lots of different things, and so we have a block of this for console, another block for something like RabbitMQ or different applications. And basically, the first step kind of is the conditional that identifies where the log message comes from, and then we go ahead, move it to a kind of a temporary variable called console message, and then the next stuff we parse it. And now I can't just parse message because it's only console messages I want to apply these parsers to, for example. So that's the kind of pattern I have, and so we have a configuration file that's grown to over 1,000 some odd lines. Yeah, I suspect there's a better way, but I don't know.
Yeah, let me see if I can share this with you. We implemented a while ago Kubernetes pod annotations.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. So the annotations are great, but and that would solve the problem in many ways. But I work for a software company, so it's not a solution we're applying to our own system. It's a monitoring solution we make available to our customers to deploy on their own, and we've been reluctant to push them to annotate their applications. We've been trying not to force them to modify things on their end, and we're kind of putting that responsibility on the monitoring solution itself.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me add, I'm just thinking very quickly in my head what I will do in this case without thinking that much. Okay, so for example, what you're doing is pretty much at least this, like tail in Kubernetes, right? You have
Right.
a path, you have bar, or log, or log containers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, containers. There you go. Thank you, ChatGPT.
Right.
Okay, yeah, and the thing is that there's a Fluent Bit property. Let me check here. Oh, you can say this tag, for example, cube that wildcard. Do you know what this star or wildcard does?
Right. So that's going to put all the container and the pod stuff gets all put in there eventually.
Yeah, this will become like cube that bark like log like containers that file name
Right.
that log. The file name is always composed by the namespace and the pod name.
Mm-hmm.
Like namespace and pod name. Okay, so you get this value. So my proposal for you, why you don't do this? A processor checks the tag, so you know that is console.
Right.
If so, append a special key, or all the conditionals that you can have.
Right.
So I'm suggesting the same thing that we did for annotations, but doing it in the agent side, right? And then here you run. I think you were using modify, right?
Right.
You run modify, and
then
you apply the modify based on this special key. It might work, and just as a POC that I have not tried out.
Sure.
But you're just thinking loudly about the solution.
So by adding a special key, we're basically changing the tag you're there, or we're adding another field. Modify.
Oh, the tag will be different already. The tag will contain the file name.
Right.
Will contain all of this. And based on this, you can use it as a conditional to modify a special key that then you can use it inside modify. If that doesn't work, yeah, we can think about other solutions. But
yeah, I mean, so yeah, with I was only using modify really to flag it. So we would flag with a special key. I guess the problem is for example, the parser filter doesn't allow me to provide a conditional that says when I should run that, when that parser filter should run. I guess it can only match. It can only match on tags at that point.
Only on tags.
Yeah, but I guess there's not. I hadn't thought of. Since you're right, the tag includes the name of the pod. Maybe we could match.
It was modify or modifier?
I use modify, but then I'm really just doing that so I can get to identifying where the parser is. So that's the parse filter, the parser
here
filter.
You go.
Yeah.
Key exists. This one.
Right. But you don't have parser in modify, right? So so what you need is that ability to do a conditional in the parser filter to identify which ones. Yeah. Parser. Yeah. The pipeline. You want the filter. A little further down, parsers. Yeah.
This is really confusing for me. Okay, so parser here, this one.
Yeah. Right. So parser doesn't provide a conditional. The only way to kind of do it is if the key exists or not. Right. So that's why I was using that temporary variable, shoving it over into a variable called console message, for example, and then I could do my parsing on that. So, but perhaps the tag, since the tag includes the pod name, that might provide another way of.
With a read. Yeah. Okay. So I know. If the tag contains the file name, and the file name contains the pod name, in the match section, you can use a regular expression.
Right. Okay, that's
simpler.
I can use a regular expression, so that you can even make it variations. Okay, I'll have to look at that. That might simplify. Right.
Rubular.com.
Yeah, no, I'm here frequently.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, the good thing about Rubular for everybody is like you have this make permalink, so you can create a shortcut for that example forever.
Yep. And since this matches exactly the parser you guys are using it, yeah. I mean, I use regex 101 when I'm using regex elsewhere, but for Fluent Bit, yeah, I go to that one. All right.
Yeah, actually, when people, for example, modify the parsers, let me check. Yeah, we ask people, hey, did you add this stuff? It's new. Please make sure to add a Rubular link as a reference, so we know that what the person was doing, right? Like this.
Right, and we ship a bunch of parsers ourselves for our various logs in our application. I hadn't thought of including the permalink for that, but I really like that idea. I'm going to steal that, or I'm going to use that same idea.
Yeah, because if you had to read this, hey, what I was doing here, you don't have an example, right? And this give you the example. Yep.
Right.
All those comp files need to be updated.
Yeah. Please submit up here. Happy to review those. Yeah, we have more here, more Rubular links.
It's nice to have good notation.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would. Our internal documents point to internal files, so they'll point to an internal text file that will have the sample log in it internally, and then we'll have samples of the logs that we are parsing, and then the regex that's being applied. And then that way, if someone wants to update their patterns of their logs from one of the application writers, they can then update the samples that they're producing so people can read them instead of publicly available.
Okay. Well, similar. I think it's a similar approach, but that's really good, folks. I think we are a bit over time right now. Do you have any more questions, or are we good to wrap up for today?
Thank you. Great one. I like the Google Sheets. That's a good idea.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you guys could join, and really happy that I hope that has been very productive for you guys. And yeah, we will try to do this more frequently with new updates or touch point, or talk about metrics processing, or just talk about specific topics, right, that people might be interested in to learn. And feel free to invite anybody who wants to join this free content. Okay, everybody. Have a great rest of the week, and thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.